Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. So recently, I've started getting really interested in the topic of the metaverse. And this may be something that you've heard of, maybe something that's starting to sort of bubble up in your psyche, in the news that you read, in the social media that you follow. But the metaverse is starting to get to be really big news. In July, late July, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, talked about how Facebook will be transformed into a metaverse company. And that has made the conversation explode. And since then, it feels like everyone's talking about it. That might just be my echo chamber on social media or the news that I follow, but it feels like all of a sudden the metaverse is being talked about everywhere. And it was before that, it was kind of really briefly spoken about. It was hardly mentioned in certainly in the internet on digital channels before about sort of April 2021. If you look at the sort of Google Trends analysis of this, before April 2021, it was hardly mentioned, and since then it's sort of exploded. Nice peak when Mark Zuckerberg started talking about him turning Facebook into that metaverse company. But where did the name come from? Where's this metaverse come from? Is it actually new? Is it since Mark Zuckerberg started talking about? Well, no. It's credited back to a sci-fi film called Snow Crash that was launched in 1992. The use of the term metaverse has steadily increased in books, primarily, and some films until the recent explosion that I just talked about online and in social media. But what is the metaverse? And I like to go to the quote that Mark Zuckerberg gave here. And what he says the metaverse is, it's a virtual environment where you can be present with people in digital spaces. You can kind of think of this as an embodied internet that you are inside of rather than just looking at. And I think that for me is like the way I quite like to think about this is that you're inside the internet and you're interacting with physical people in a digital space rather than just looking at the internet and interacting with people through the lens of a screen. But it's essentially a collection of technologies that exist and that I'm sure will know about, such as augmented reality, virtual reality, high throughput networks, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, online commerce, virtual meeting technology like Zoom, like Teams, virtual event platforms, online gaming concepts. And it's a collection of all these technologies that create a new upgraded version of what we currently know as the internet. Now, one of the leading organizations that's looking at this from a certain lens anyway is the law firm Norton Rose Fulbright. And they talk about the characteristics of the metaverse and that allow this world, this embodiment of yourself on an online space to help understand what needs to be in place for the metaverse to exist. Now, there's 5 things that they talk about. One is persistence. So this is the metaverse will exist regardless of where you are, the time of day. So it persists regardless of all those things. Synchronicity, which is that the participants of the metaverse, the people who are engaging with the metaverse, will interact with one another and the digital world in real time. And react to the virtual environment just like they would in the physical world. So you're at the same time interacting in the digital world in real time in a very similar way that you would in a physical world if you met up in the park or something like that. Number 3 is the availability. So everyone will be able to log on simultaneously. There's no cap on the number of participants, how many people can be there, how often they can come in. It will just be available. And this obviously links with persistence and synchronicity. The 4th characteristics is economy, and I think this is the really important one that's going to drive and make this really accelerate. So the people, including in businesses, will be able to supply goods, supply services, and exchange those goods and services for value that people will recognize. If you start to think about cryptocurrency, more recently NFTs, this plays really importantly into the space of that interaction of goods and services. That value may start off being something like interaction of goods and services or skins, for example, if you're a Fortnite follower. So things that people trade in games, but obviously this could go much further than that, currency, and all sorts of other obviously services and products that you might want to interact with and buy digitally. And then the fifth characteristic is interoperability. So the metaverse will essentially, and this is what Norton Rose Fulbright talk about, allow participants to use their virtual things, their items, their products, their services, their persona across different experiences on the metaverse. I think this is a really important one. This is a total cross-platform capability. And the idea here is that there is a single, and there's some debate in the metaverse fraternity of, is there one metaverse or multiple metaverses? And if there are multiple, how do they interoperate between each other? So those characteristics are really important, and they're quite commonly known and understood now. But the question is, does the metaverse even exist? Well, the short answer is no. There is no metaverse. This is simply an idea at the moment. It's the evolution of technologies. It's the evolution of ways that we currently interact. It's a collection of the things that I just mentioned in terms of digital versions of how we interact with each other. But certain elements, as I say, of these things have been tested. Things like cryptocurrency, things like high-speed networks. Gaming platforms like Roblox, for example, essentially have been testing this idea of interacting with each other online through the gaming lens, and working together to solve problems and challenges as you do in games with your friends, with your family, in a kind of very social way. Fortnite more recently, yes, it's a gaming platform, bane of my life, because my kids are always on it, but they have been testing out their platform to be able to support these concepts of the metaverse. Recently, Ariana Grande did a concert in Fortnite, and at certain times, the Fortnite players could come together. They could travel to the concert. It was fully immersive. There was singing. You could interact with people. Whilst it was quite a basic version, actually what they were testing was the ability for their platform to cope with the kind of workload that the metaverse would need it to. So in terms of like what this could do, so it's sort of, we talked about a bit about the background of it, talked a bit about what it means, the characteristics of it, where it's come from, whether it exists already. But really what's interesting is where this can go. How will the metaverse manifest itself? Because it has the potential to disrupt so much, because if it does become the next way we interact online, or an evolution of the way we interact online, this has potential to really disrupt all sorts of industries in the way that the internet did, in the way that digital transformation has in our real lives, and the way that things like social media have transformed the way we interact with each other. Metaverse has a similar opportunity to disrupt all parts of our lives. So the use cases around it, as I mentioned, gaming is one of the big ones, and that looks like it's going to be one of the first places where the metaverse is really tested, it will manifest itself more quickly. The game's Second Life it's been around for a long time, and a lot of what Second Life was doing is now what Metaverse is being sort of talked about as something that will be achieved, but early versions of that, and it's considered the sort of front runner, the one in gaming that is most likely to get to the sort of this manifestation of the metaverse most quickly. So joining games, playing games together online in the metaverse, in the same way that you used to hold a controller, and this will be getting into the game and working together and moving around together in all sorts of different ways, from gambling to shoot 'em ups to car racing games and the end to end. I think another big one, and then we've seen a lot of this through sort of early versions of this through the pandemic, is trips and holidays. So if you imagine the example that in the metaverse, let's say your family, your friends decide you want to take a trip. You want to go to safari in South Africa, and entering the metaverse, you're instantly transformed over to South Africa, and you can drive around. You can go and see the animals. You can go get a drink. You can hang out together. The quality of the visual and the senses will be such that it feels like you're there. You can drop into certain museums that are there. You can go to different restaurants. And so while you're in the metaverse, you'll be able to interact in a way that you would physically. And we've seen things, as I said, like this during the pandemic, where you can virtually visit different sites around the world, watching the experience on your screen. But the metaverse takes that a step further, and you can actually physically or virtually be there, but your avatar, if you like, will enable you to be there a little bit more than just looking at it. And then we've also seen other things like museums have started to allow you to go and virtually move around the museum so that you can interact with artwork or other artifacts, again, from your home and through the screen. But that's something else that you might be able to do, trips and social interactions with people, visit galleries and those sorts of things that you haven't been able to do, you wouldn't be able to physically get to. And we've also seen, with the concept of NFT, these non-fungible tokens, driving a whole bunch of new artwork and people trading that artwork. You can now visit already through on websites, NFT galleries where you can look at artwork and you can buy and you can trade. So again, this is something else that you might be able to do. You might be able to travel and go on trips together within the metaverse as well. I think a big one that's sort of more on the kind of personal and social side, both gaming and those sort of trips, but there's a corporate sort of angle here. And there's obviously a huge interest in the online economy that the metaverse will drive, largely driven by technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrency. So that will give you the platform and both the currency to be able to trade digitally and convert that over to physical money as well back in the real world. Digital meetings, meeting spaces. I've seen, again, Zuckerberg, another example from Facebook, have released their digital meeting space. Again, it's more of an immersive, supposed to be more of an immersive experience that allows you to meet digitally. So rather than just looking at each other through Zoom or Teams, you physically or virtually rather enter a digital meeting space and interact as if you were sat in a meeting room. I think marketing, there's a big thing to think about in terms of marketing and whole new forms of marketing embedded into the experience, real-time, personalized, targeted, tailored to your digital persona or your physical persona, your real world persona. So there's a whole load of use cases, a whole load of ways we might interact with the metaverse, but essentially it will be living as we live our lives physically, but in a digital world. Now, there are some huge, this doesn't exist. There are some huge obstacles, legal, regulatory obstacles that need to be overcome. There's issues with data sharing, privacy, consent to how data is used, data protection. We have different regulations around the world. So if there's only one single and interoperable metaverse, then how does data sharing and data consent and data usage and data storage work? And can that happen? How do we deal with cyber attacks? How do we deal with all sorts of illegal activity in the metaverse? But essentially, how do we also avoid the attacks of the metaverse? And who's responsible for all of that? Is there one police and governing body that looks after the whole metaverse? Is that corporate? Is that government? How does that come together in the regulations? There's a whole bunch of IP challenges about who owns the things that exist. And are you upload your content to the iCloud. Similar thing here. Are we essentially handing over our digital persona to either corporates or governments? And real big sort of questions to ask about that. So whilst the idea is great, the technology exists, we can do this. I think there's a whole bunch of challenges to get over before this becomes a real thing. So look, I'm very new to this topic. I've done some research and this is what I'm learning, I'm understanding. Frankly, I don't think a world where we sit with, virtual reality headset on, interacting with each other through glasses in that way, sat at one chair all day is, frankly, that's my idea of a dystopia. I hope that isn't what happens. There's some really interesting organizations that are working on how you much more closely blend physical and digital rather than fully immersive digital, which takes you away from kind of real social interaction and puts that all in a digital space. So I hope we can put the controls and the guardrails in place that mean we support a much brighter future where digital and physical interact with each other rather than leaving the old current world behind and move to this new digital space. As I learn more, maybe I'll put out some more content on this. If you've got some views on the metaverse, if you've heard what it is, if you've interacted it in some way through any of the early stages, I'd love to hear from you and what your ideas and views are. This is a little bit of a step change from some of my normal content, but I really think that the technology, the data, AI, the platforms that exist all come together really nicely in this topic of metaverse. So I hope it's interesting to you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to speak to you again sometime soon. Thanks a lot.